3, 2.
Good evening. Welcome to Family and Community Media. We're here this evening with three powerful men in the community, and we're going to be talking about this evening education. We're going to touch on some issues with education, but it's awesome to have the men here because we want the male perspective on what's going on in the schools and with our children. And then we'll come back another time and get the women's perspective, and then we'll bring it all together and just kind of put it together. But I'm going to again introduce myself. I'm Lynn Davis. I'm here with Family and Community Media. And we're out of the Family and Community Empowerment Center over on 301 Merritt Avenue in Wheatley Heights. But I'm going to just give an opportunity for each and every one of our guests to introduce themselves to you. Starting with.
Hello, I'm Mark Jackson, and I'm glad to be here, to be on this panel, to talk about education and in the state of our children today in these schools.
I'm Elliot Allen, also a member of Family and Community Media, and it's always a pleasure to be here to talk about these issues. It's very important, so I'm looking forward to it.
Hi, my name is Ron Harris, and I'm happy to be here today.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you. And I just want to say, our director, we thank him for being here. And we can't see him, he's behind the scenes. My other half, Anthony Davis, so thank you all for being here this evening. But we're going to start off real quick. We're not going to be here that long with a couple of questions. One of the things that came up in an article recently was about the racial disparities in the school. One thing that said that the students feel that they are handled differently or evaluated differently, or their behavior is harsher than the white students because there's no black teachers in the school. So I just want to get your impact on that about having not only black teachers in the school, African American teachers or men of color, but male teachers. There's also a lack of male teachers. Is that something that we can improve on, and just your overall opinion on that?
Yes, that is something definitely we could improve on, and what we should improve on. You know, a lot of us men, you know, when we go out to look for jobs, we go look for jobs let's say construction jobs, or think of jobs that are being outsourced, I should say. Like for a job like a teacher or a doctor or a nurse, these are the things that I think that us as black men should be looking forward to doing, and as a teacher, which cannot be outsourced, is basically what I'm getting to. And I think that, you know, we should start looking into more of becoming teachers. You know, black males becoming teachers, because we need black men in the schools. We need our young boys to see them in the school, somebody that looks like them. Because if they don't see anybody in the school that look like them, you know, they're not going to be able to relate to anybody. You know, because we all come from different neighborhoods. We all treated different. We all brought up differently. You know, blacks are brought up in black neighborhoods. We greet each other in different ways. Whites in their neighborhood, they greet each other in different ways. And the way we greet them, they may look at it as violent. But if you greet me in my neighborhood as a black man, I'm going to know that, you know, you're giving me love. So that's the big difference, you know. And the thing about it is that people just don't want to learn about each other. That's what the problem. People do not want to learn about each other. You know, until we do that, you know, we're always going to have these differences in schools, and people are going to look at us different and treat us differently.
I agree. This is a great question that you brought up, Lynn. I think that, you know, one of the most important things we have to look at in our society, whatever color you are, but especially for our society, is going to be role models. Role models are very, very, very important. And it starts, sometimes, obviously, it starts at a very young age. And sometimes we underestimate the power of visions and what we see. Images matter. And we underestimate how important images are. And it starts, obviously, our children, their first form of role models, their first form of images is obviously first and foremost us as parents. But then when they start to go to school, teachers are very, very, very important. I think we underestimate the power of the influence that a teacher has on a young mind. So when we're talking about images, when that child goes to school, they're being inundated for whatever the reason. We'll get into that. They're being inundated with an image of, wow, it's a white teacher here. It's a white female here. And I'm not putting them down. I'm just telling you, for a black student, he may go his whole first 5 years of school. We had this conversation last week, and I posed that question because the question came to me several months back. And somebody asked me, did you have a black teacher? I said, I think so. Did you have a black male teacher? I remembered a few, but I only remember them being, guess what? Substitute teachers. They were not my actual teachers. So those images right there kind of like, why would a child want to become a teacher, as Marky just talked about? Because he didn't have that image. He didn't go to school like, I like Mr. Jackson. I want to be like Mr. Jackson. Because there's no Mr. Jackson in our schools. So it's very important to try to show these role models. It has to start early so we can get, men of color, especially for our boys, men of color into school to start showing those role models. Images matter, and that will propel, even without conversation, just seeing those images. Because what happens in our society with our young black boys, they're going into what? Sports. They're going into the music industry. Because those are the images that we're seeing. Sometimes we're kind of going away from that a little bit, but in the 80s into the 90s, drug dealing was a big problem in our streets. Those are the images that we see. I'm sometimes fascinated, it's not good, but I'm fascinated by listening to guys who were selling drugs in the 80s and 90s and how their minds worked as businessmen. But if you talk to them, they was influenced by the images that they saw. They saw the other guys in the street selling drugs. I want to be like that. There's no way, there's no reason why we can't get our youth to say, I want to be like Mr. Jackson, my teacher. So that's very, very important, and we have to try to figure out a way to influence our kids. It's really going to start early, to teach them to become educators.
Well, I think these two gentlemen pretty much covered it all. But, I think the teachers are also underpaid. I just don't understand why we don't have any male teachers. There's a shortage of male teachers. And I don't know, it's just something that we have to work on.
We'll do it. We'll get it there.
Thank you. All you guys, excellent answers. One of the things that you touched on, I agree so much about everything, including a role model. One of the things, Mark, you talked on is that almost like a miscommunication. And I mean because they say that more minority students or students of color are suspended more or receive stronger or stricter discipline in school when something happened. So in this instance would be if there's a behavior problem, they would more likely be recommended for special education or be suspended from school. Less than the white student may get more counseling preferred than a suspension or recommendations to special education evaluation. So that communication problem between the students, do you think if there was that presence of male blacks from male to male, same race, would that still exist, or you think it's just a kid, or is it not the identification of the teacher?
I think, like you said, it comes down to communication. I think that, first off, when it comes down to school, before you even get to school, education starts in the home. It starts with communication. And you should be having, your child should be able to come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I'm having a problem with something. And you should be able to sit down and talk to them and say, well, what is this problem? You should be able to say, Mom, Dad, I had this problem outside with, when I was playing with a child outside. I had a situation. What should I do? Or I got a problem that I need to solve. Can you help me? Starts at home. Once you, develop that communication with your child, that trust, your child would learn to do that while they're in school. So that if they're in school and they're having a problem, they'll come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I'm having a problem in school. My teacher is telling me that I need to go special classes, but I don't feel I need to. Can you come up there to talk to me, to the school? You know, so I think it comes down to communication, and in the first line is with the parents. Is to speak to the parents, you know, and get the communication going between them, so that they can let their parents know what's going on, what they need help with in school. That's what I think.
So, again, a very, very powerful question, and I think that I'm going to stick to the theme of images matter. And so, and I want to be careful here. Our white brothers and sisters who are in the schools, let's give them credit. You know, they're doing the best that they can. So I don't want this to sound like, you know, we're going down on them. They're there, they're getting education to you know, perform in those schools, but they are kind of under the 8 ball. That question to specifically answer what you're saying in terms of different punishments. If a white teacher, watch me now, a white teacher is teaching a class, especially a new teacher, a lot of times, just as in law enforcement, they're coming from a different background. Somebody said that earlier, about coming from different backgrounds. So a lot of times, they're only familiar with what they may have seen or what they may have heard, or what nowadays with media paints images. Remember what I said, images matter. And the media is creating images for different people. That's another day, another show. But images matter. So now that teachers has images of how, wow, if I see a black kid, being honest, a black kid perform a certain thing, behave a certain way, I don't know how to deal with it. Whereas if it's a black man or a black woman, we do have more experience in that. Again, it's the same thing in law enforcement. When a police officer approaches somebody of a different race, it could be a black man approaching a white person. We don't know how to deal with certain things. So that teacher may harshly punish that black child because I'm not understanding why is this child raising his voice. And be clear, I'm not saying that it's okay for the child. The child should never be raising his voice. But whatever the behavioral issue is, it is important that you have your own personal experience to know, like, I know how to deal with that. Sometimes fear comes into play. There's images, unfortunately, let's be honest, you know, the images that we see of blacks creates a lot of fear, especially with people, non-black people. They are afraid. So if a child starts to really raise his voice a little bit to the teacher, instead of that teacher saying, oh, I'm in charge here, and I know how to handle this, the teacher may back down. Let me go call the principal. Let me escalate it where he maybe did not have to, he or she did not have to. So images matter all across the board, but we can't really change that. You know, the media kind of puts whatever they want to put out there. That's why it is important, once again, to get, you know, people who can kind of understand a little bit more. I mean, maybe an experienced teacher, maybe a white teacher who's experienced, they may be able to make a little bit better decisions, but it is becoming an issue that punishment, we are seeing that punishments are a little bit harsher. They're making certain diagnoses about kids that seem a bit extreme to me, but they're making these, you know, diagnoses about kids. And I just think that some of it is simply because of a lack of experience. You know, I've had this situation myself in school this year. I've had to go up to the school several times because my youngest son is quite emotional. He doesn't have outbursts, but he's emotional in the sense that, you know, if he doesn't get the score that he wants, he kind of loses it. And I felt, when I went to the school, I felt, as Marky is saying, a disconnect of communication. And it's important to me, but I feel it. So I'm really taking the onus upon myself because that's his teacher. I have to communicate with them. So that's where it's also important for us as parents. When we go to see that teacher, I can take it a certain way. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I leave and my wife are having that conversation in private, I'm not too happy with, I feel, maybe I'm wrong, how they're speaking to me about the situation. But when I'm there, I have to remain professional and I have to communicate to you. So that's a discipline on our part that I have to look at it like, you don't understand. I'm not going to be offended by that, but let's try to work together in this particular situation. Yeah. So we have to be careful.
Yeah, and it's also, like I said, you know, sometimes the teacher may send out a recommendation where they should send your child. And then automatically the parents are like, okay. They don't question. Right. You know, it's like, you know, you got to question these things. Right. You know, and they just automatically say, okay. And then that's not where your child belongs. you're setting them back. It's okay to question people.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if they have a degree in teaching and psychology, whatever the case may be. You know, they can be wrong also. You know your child. I know my child, I'll tell you that much.
That's right.
You know, that's what the problem is. Communication, not only with the teachers, but with your child.
Yes.
We need to speak to our kids, because our kids know what they want.
Yes. Right.
And when the teachers say something, or recommend, I should say again, we need to get up and act on it and say, why does my child need this? You show me some things that would make me, know that my child needs to be put in a special class.
Absolutely.
If you don't do that, they're just going to put them there.
I agree. And just, I think Mark touched on that earlier. I want to reiterate that. He's saying not only is the communication important with, the parent and the teacher, but the communication is very important with the parent and the children. Because this is the thing, when you go to those meetings at the school, you got to be clear, and you have to have certain things in order. That if the teacher's saying certain things to you, I'm not the type of person that's going to challenge the teacher, but you have to know certain things about your child. And that's where the communication is going to come in, that they may be saying certain things to you. Again, to use myself as an example, when I would go there, my son's teacher's like, oh, he looks like, they pretty much were saying like they look like he was going to commit suicide. But I know him, and I know that that's how he is. When we go to bowling, our kids at bowling, that's what he does. If he's not bowling up to spec, the guy will be bowling a good game, he throw one bad ball, oh, daddy, you have to calm him down. But I know he's okay. He's okay. But she's, and again, I'm not bad-mouthing her, she's doing the best that she can, but she's like overreacting to it. But you have to have that communication to where you're not going to go up there. There's a saying with lawyers that you never want to ask that person an understanding question that you don't know the answer to. And it's the same thing. When you go to that school, you never want to be sitting there and the teacher's telling you something, you're like, what? I can't believe it. You want to be able to have that communication with your child, that like, you're not really telling me something I don't know. Maybe I'm a little surprised that he's doing that here, he or she is doing that here, but I know that that's a characteristic of my child. Absolutely. And sometimes you can fight it to be like, I'm not going to argue with you, but I have to take that with a grain of salt, because I know that's not really within the personality of my child. So that communication is very, very important.
And I'll just comment on that. I agree with both of you, and I think, touched on a couple of things. I think it's important that the special ed parent engagement is very important on that, especially that we've known that schools and that have used template reports for special education. They have a one-shot diagnosis. We know the kids get diagnosed under one thing, ADD or ED or emotional disability, and it's not a true evaluation. And I think it is important, like you said, parents to be involved in that type of, with the kids and as well as with the parents, and really not always relying on what the schools say, but also seeking outside evaluations, and like you would with a doctor. Someone tells you that this is a life-changing situation, you would go get a second opinion. And I think our parents need to say, when the kids are diagnosed, to say, you know what, I'm going to get my own second opinion and find an outside resource and get an opinion, because many times we learn that the schools is just, it's not the situation as what the school has said it is. That's the point. But I want to just kind of ask you all three a question, because we talked about a lot, but I'd like to go into personal experiences. So my question is going to be, I know you're all great students in high school, but if you go back in your school years, take you guys back a little bit, what could have the school provided you to make you a better student? What was missing, or what could have been there where you said, you know what, whether it was parent engagement, teacher communication, the curriculum might have not been challenging, but what, if you could look back and said, boy, I would have been a better student if. So that's the question. What is that if? I'll start with you, Mark.
Oh, man.
Good.
Oh, my goodness. You just put me on the spot here. I don't know. I'm going to be honest. When I was in school, I was a good student. But I tell you, when I was in school, I had a guidance counselor. And my guidance counselor, he helped me through a lot. You know, I can go to my guidance counselor and talk to him about anything. I mean, my guidance counselor even came to my house at times. He even came to church with me sometimes. And he actually gave me a job over the summertime because if I was, out in the street during the summertime, if I got in trouble. What could I have done better? I mean, that would have made me a better student? That's a good question. I don't know. But I just know that, if it wasn't for my guidance counselor and I have some other teachers in school that I still know about and I still think about, that I probably wouldn't have made it this far. And I think that's, going back to, I think that's what's lacking these days in school today. I mean, I know that we have a lot of teachers out there that really care about their students, but some, like Brother said, they're underpaid, and they just don't want the problems of, if they try and help a student, what the parents may say, or do, or might just jump on you for no reason.
Right.
If you try and tell them that your son is doing wrong, But what could have made me a better student? That's a good question. But I know who made me a better person, and that was my guidance counselor and some teachers in my school.
Again, very good question, and it's a little bit challenging, I think, for all of us because, well, I can speak for myself, and I think Mark is the same thing. And I tell my kids this, my wife gets angry. I hated school, I'll be honest with you. I didn't like school, but to first answer your question, I think what would have helped me in school was more practical things. One of the things that I remember, one of the classes that I do remember the most were practical classes that taught us about how to be a man, or how to be an adult, I should say. We had a class about careers. It was a career building class. I enjoyed that class because it told us about the different careers, the different things that you can do. So I think even for a kid who I'm not into the math, I didn't want to do it. But that motivated me to hear like, oh, when I get out, I can get a job doing this. So that's something that I think, because you have to have some sort of motivation. I'm going through this with my kids right now. Most kids today, unfortunately, don't have motivation. And I tell my kids, Daddy didn't like school. But one thing that motivated me was my hatred of school. I hate to put it that way, but I want to be honest. I never wanted to go to summer school. I never wanted to go to night school, because that meant that I had to be in those walls longer than I had to. So that was not going to happen. So I was motivated to get out of school. And I was motivated to become an adult. I wanted to work. I wanted to be able to make my money and live on my own. I wanted to be able to, I didn't want to ask my mother no more for the cookies. I wanted to be able to buy my own stuff. I wanted to be able to buy my own car, buy my own sneakers. So that would have motivated me more. I think that a school had more practical stuff that makes people say, like, I'm going to show you how to become an adult. I think that's what our kids today lack. It comes back again to images matter. When kids go to school and they're not seeing somebody in front of them that's like, oh, I can relate to you. I want to be like that. Again, it's not their fault, but I can't be like Mr. Goldstein because Mr. Goldstein is a white Jewish man. I'm not Jewish. But if I see a young brother up there, like, he looked like me, or he looked like my brother, literally, or my dad, or I would be more say, my cousin, somebody that's like, he's young. Wow, I went outside, I saw Mr. Jackson. He had a 180, he had a 300E, he had a Mercedes, or whatever. Those are the things that I think practical would help our children, so much more. Practical classes, seeing things visually practical would be something that would have motivated me more, and it would have helped me more in school.
Well, my best subjects, my favorite was math and science. And as a kid, 100 years ago, I suffered with asthma, seriously badly. And I had a homeschooling for 2 years. And the teachers that I had, they just wasn't prepared. The school wasn't prepared for me. I would have a different teacher like every other week. And it's like I had basically teach myself because they didn't care. So most of the time they're looking at their watch. And this is Amityville School. So, you know, we have also private tutoring. And, you know, until the money ran out, of course, because the schools weren't really, you know, helping. So I would say if we had better programs for people that are disabled, teachers that really care, you know, about their students, whether they're disabled or in school in general. So that's why I said before that the teachers are underpaid, and I think if they're paid right, they would take it seriously, the job seriously, which they should take it seriously anyway. But yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Great questions, great answers, all of you. And we're going to close up soon, but I got one last question, and I'm going to make it specific to each of you. This one is for Mark, and I'll read his, and Ron, yours. For Mark, we all know that sometimes we know that the student is also responsible for his actions. You can't always blame the teacher or blame the parent. Sometimes the student is not doing what he or she's supposed to do, whether it be laziness or they want to hang out or the different challenges. So my question is going to be to you. If you had a student in front of you who said, you know what, I don't care. I don't like school. I don't want to be there. I don't want to go. I want to hang out with my friends. I show up when I show up. I do what I want to do. What advice would you give to that student? And for you, Elliot, we know parent engagement is extremely important. However, a lot of parents are not engaged with their students' school activity. So my question would be to you, what recommendations would you give parents to be more engaged? And you, Ron, for the community, it takes a village to raise a child. So we know that the community would be churches or civic groups, and they all play a part in the child's growth and well-being. So what message would you give to our community leaders? So I'll start with you, and I'm just going to give recommendations, and what would recommendations each of you have to each different, party I said to. I said, as we say, it takes a village to raise a child. So here are the recommendations to the village.
First, I would ask him, I said, well, where do you see yourself 10 years from now, if you decide not to go to school? So I would ask him. And I would say to him, you know, if you can see yourself 10 years from now, again, what would you be doing? What do you think the benefits are for you if you go to school? As opposed to if you didn't go to school. Do you think you'd be able to get a job? Do you want to raise a family? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to have stability in your life? Do you want to have a home? So again, I'll ask him, where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? And I'll say, think about it.
The question that you asked me, Marky, believe it or not, actually answered my question as well, because, you know, that is a big problem in our schools, and our man has talked about how we want teachers to care about the students. I believe this. 9 times out of 10, the teachers that show up in that classroom on that first day, they care. And they really, when they go to school for it, they're gung-ho. I want to do this, I want to be an educator. But I've talked to a lot of teachers, and what happens with, through time, through what your question is, through dealing with parents, those teachers are with those kids for 8 hours, and they're putting in and instilling values in those children the best that they can. And I feel like I'm getting through to this kid. And you send that kid home, and that parent wiped out everything that you just did. That's a challenging part for the teachers. So as parents got to understand the big picture. And if they understand the big picture, they're going to ask all of those questions that Marky just said. And they're going to understand that that teacher is a real big key to the big picture. I got to be able to communicate with that teacher. And this is where it's a powerful thing. We're talking about the children, but it's bigger than that, because unless the parent understands I just talked about how our kids are not making it because our kids don't see any images that they believe, I can get there. But I'm going to tell you what's worse than that. A lot of our parents don't see that for themselves. So how are they going to see that for their children? How are you going to see, son, you can make it? That's where the problem comes in. But if that parent really believes, there's something, son or daughter, I have not been able to accomplish, but you can accomplish those things. And if you believe that, hell, sometimes I don't want to go talk to the teacher. I'm having a problem with my other son. I'm getting emails all day from the teacher. Every time the emails come, I don't want to read it. But I understand the big picture that the work has to be put in. So I have to address that. I have to go and sit there and talk to the teacher. I tell my son, I don't want to go there and sit there and your teacher going to be saying, I don't want to do that. But I understand if I do not do that, I'm destroying his big picture. So that's the motivation that makes me say, all right, we're going to go and meet this teacher, and I got to sit in front of her and have her tell me, you didn't do this homework assignment, and you didn't do that homework assignment, and I got to sit there and say, I'm sorry, Miss So-and-so, we're going to work on it. I don't want to do that. But because they are my big picture, and I understand that, that allows me to go do that. So parents have to understand the big picture that you are the one that's going to allow your child. They're dependent on you. They are dependent on you. You are developing that child. If you understand that, that's why I get so frustrated, because I know people can't, the decisions sometimes that you see parents make, you look, oh, what's wrong with him or her? They don't understand the power that you have when you are a parent. That is a powerful position, that you are responsible for making this person's decision-making skills. You're doing that. You're responsible for the rest of their lives, the decisions that they're going to make. Sometimes they're going to make decisions that you don't agree with. But guess what? It came from you. It came from the images that you presented to them. It came from the lessons that you presented to them. They may not see it as a child, but when they get older, you know what? My father, that sucker was always in front of my teachers. That matters as they become older, when they have their own children. It may be 30 years down the line. But when they start going through it, they're like, you know what? My mom and dad always went up to that school. They always did. I don't feel like doing it, but I understand now why they did it. So this is where you have to, understand the big picture of, raising that child, the responsibility of being a mom and a dad. That'll make you go to the school and communicate with the teachers.
And they're following your parents.
Sure.
I'm sorry, the question?
Your recommendations to our community leaders, church and civic leaders, because they also have a big key in programs and
as far as
in our youth, to help our youth, yes.
To talk to the youth, get them involved with different programs, get them involved with different programs, maybe basketball, like something like we're going to be doing in the summer, electronics and different recreation activities, and from there, they get to know you, get comfortable with you, you can explain to them about jobs and things in their future, things that they should know as they get older, so they don't go through the wrong path.
All right, guys, well, you survived the video panel, and we just want to thank you. Excellent answers, everyone. We will come back. We appreciate each and every one of you being here. We will come back, and we're going to bring back another topic. I like to talk about the Me Too. A lot going on with that, especially with Bill Cosby right now. And then also talk about our normal policing and other things that we have going on in the community. So on behalf of Family and Community Media, we thank you for tuning in this time, and we look forward to bringing you another one of our awesome programs, and we will keep you posted. I'd like to have you join the panel or sit in as a part of our participating audience. Again, thank you on behalf of Family and Community Media.